you know what you see, and if you can't see it, you can't really be it. So we figure out ways to connect some of those dots for those educators, for those after school programs, and for those students.
The topic of why not kick off our newest episode of No Surprises. Welcome. It is a look inside the ambitious, joyful, and occasionally terrifying journey of creators. And as y'all have been listening this season, we are talking about community. And we've been bringing in guests from all different sorts of perspective of communities, whether they run their own or, running someone else's or stuff, all that fun stuff.
It's been so fun. I think it's like you and I are both very much people, and I love that this has broadened our community. Even like we try to do a mixture of people we know and people we've never met before. And our guest today is someone who is new to us, but whose work is something that has we've actually kind of overlapped with in the past, which we'll talk a little bit about. So today we want to welcome Kristin C. Lewis. Kristin, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Hello.
Kristin is an enthusiastic do-gooder with innovative business acumen, working to inspire and diversify the next generation of aviation leaders for United Airlines. She leads a brilliant team that manages the nonprofit portfolios for Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, Denver, DC, New York, New Jersey, while supervising large-scale global activations. We are so happy to have you. What an exciting job you have.
Seriously.
The best job ever.
I feel like this is kind of how we usually kick this off, but like, how did you make your way to this role, and what does your day-to-day look like now that you're in it?
My journey has been a lot of twists and turns, but that's kind of the exciting part about it. I got into this work, to take it a step back, I worked at a wonderful breakfast place in Wicker Park here in Chicago. And
what was it called?
It was Bongo Room. Shout out to Derek and John, the best breakfast place in Chicago.
Wow.
Wonderful pancakes.
Oh, amazing pancakes.
A great breakfast burrito.
I eat the breakfast burrito to this day every time I go there. It's
so good.
It's phenomenal. You're never going to go wrong.
Kelsey lives right by there.
I really do. I actually really like taking my son there for like when I'm taking care of him solo on a weekend morning. He and I go on little hangouts together, and Bongo Room is a favorite.
It's wonderful. I was there on Sunday. I had the chocolate French toast. It's everything.
Brilliant. Okay, so the story starts at Bongo Room, which is amazing.
Doesn't
and
the story always start at Bongo Room? Yeah.
I love it.
So it starts at Bongo Room. I had a regular of mine who worked in corporate America and was the VP of Public Affairs and Communications. And she one day asked me if I wanted to work for her as more of like an administrative assistant type thing. I said yes, and went to corporate America, which I never thought I would do. I didn't know how to do that. But and I also had some background in media relations, doing media for restaurants. And so when I moved over to corporate America, quickly moved into the media relations team, which was wonderful and a lot of fun. Learned a lot about writing and pitching. But the work that really inspired me was the stuff that we did with our nonprofit partners. So the volunteer events and the check presentations. And luckily I had a wonderful director that was open to me moving over to the public affairs side of things. And so because of, an amazing mentor and some great advocacy from people that knew me, I was able to make that transition. And that was in 2008. And really right before kind of corporate social responsibility was such a significant part of business. And so feel really lucky that I've been able to kind of spend the last 15 years growing with it. But
wow.
Incredibly excited to, have my dream job at United Airlines and manage our nonprofit portfolios and a phenomenal team and just do really amazing stuff for the communities where we work.
That's so fantastic. As we were prepping and going through this in advance, it occurred to me, like in our past life, when Mal and I founded our company together in 2014, one of the things we were doing was large scale nonprofit organization event production. So we worked with multiple nonprofits that were benefited from the support of United Airlines. And it's just funny, like the ways
it's
that
all
you
coming back to
overlap.
me now.
I know. I was like, we had
a very
particularly
real Celine Dion moment over here.
Yes, they were the name sponsor from one of our clients, and I just remember like a part of our job during the day was assembling the little United Airlines airplanes for the tables. And what a funny like circle back moment that this would be the conversation we're having now. So
I love that. It's a small world,
It is
nonprofit space and Chicago. I mean, I've been here for over 25 years. It seems small at this point because everything's so intertwined, which I love.
Totally.
Also.
Yes. So I guess my question about that is like, obviously corporate responsibility and this sense of community engagement is something that has kind of come, it's like peaked and valleyed over the years, right? You think about, IBM, my parents, my grandparents were at IBM, Mal's family was there. And at one point my grandpa played in like the IBM band and my grandma played basketball for the team, right? There was this sense of like a corporation is a part of a community.
Right.
And now I feel like there is definitely this sense of corporations have potentially a responsibility to help support other communities in need. But why? Like, why does United care about doing this? It seems like the type of efforts that you all do are definitely more like hands-on, but maybe you could speak to like why that feels like such an important part of this major airline.
Sure. I mean, yes, we're a major corporation, but we, have almost, 100,000 employees. And so those are individuals that live in the community where we work. That's where their families are. That's where their friends are. That's where our customers are. And so, I think there's been definitely a significant transition from what used to be writing a check and taking a picture with the big check and your CEO and kind of like high-fiving yourself, to really saying, okay, how do we best support our employees and the rest of the community that lives here with us? And how do we do that in a way that feels authentic and fun and also meets business goals? I think, people think of corporate responsibility as kind of, some people are like, oh, you just get to go to galas and, you just do kind of like these higher echelon things. And it's like, no, that's not the point of it. Is really to ensure that we have a talent pipeline coming into the airline. We're inspiring young people to just understand all the different careers that are in aviation, which I think demystifying aviation, if you don't come from an aviation family, is huge. Especially when you're talking about, communities that have been traditionally underserved and under recognized. And so I think what we've done with our giving pillars is really connected those to specific business initiatives that we have. So we're not a nice to have, we are really an integrated element into a larger business plan. But all of that really supports our employees and where we fly, honestly.
That's really cool. And I love the idea of like corporations are ultimately people, and that's why it matters, right? Because those people like have their lives touched in so many different ways. I have a specific question, which is, you mentioned you are like pillars of giving. How did you describe it? Pillars of giving?
Our giving pillars.
Giving pillars. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, I would love to tell you about them. So we developed these kind of thinking about ourselves as, something very specific. We're an airline. So
Yeah.
what are some of the business goals that we have, and how could we integrate those into the community? So I think the one of the most significant ones is really our disaster relief and recovery. So having planes, with what happened in Maui, with what's going on in Florida currently, we're able to get cargo and professionals into areas and people out of areas incredibly quickly. So that's a huge resource that we have, that we're able to activate really quickly. Our cargo team is phenomenal. And so disaster relief and recovery is a key element for us, just because it usually is, again, impacting our employees, and our customer base. Another one is flying towards a more sustainable future. So we've got some really aggressive sustainability goals. I do not know sustainable aviation fuel. I don't know how to make that. I don't know what that looks like. We have some amazing environmental folks on our team who are doing that. But the pieces of the puzzle that we really can fill in the gaps are around that environmental justice piece. So making sure people that are living by our airports aren't negatively affected by, runoff, noise pollution, light pollution, things like that. So being cognizant in kind of a complementary way. And then the two pillars that really are kind of most intertwined are breaking down barriers and promoting inclusion, and are inspiring the next generation of leaders. So with those organizations, I joke we get a double bubble a lot of the time because they're complementary. They're both doing that. And that's really, just again, demystifying aviation careers, creating access points, experiential learning for students. You know what you see, and if you can't see it, you can't really be it. So we figure out ways to connect some of those dots for those educators, for those after school programs, and for those students.
And if you can't see it, you can't be it.
You can't be it.
I love it.
That's true. Have you ever been bitten by the aviation bug? Like, is this something that you've ever wanted to try your hand at?
It's funny because you do get sucked into it, because if you're surrounded by it, it's so interesting. It's so complicated. But it's so like intriguing. I joke, it's a miracle that a plane takes off at on time every time. So but I also struggle with some fear of heights. So that makes it a little complicated.
I'll
maybe pilot, but I have been up in, a 2-seater and a 4-seater. And once my heart palpitations calm down a little bit.
Some immersion therapy for you,
just
go. Like straight into it.
Exactly. That's kind of how
Force
I roll.
yourself to get comfortable in the discomfort.
Yes.
Yeah. We were just flying back from New York, and I distinctly remember looking at the engine out of the window and being like, this is like really impressive that they get this big piece of metal off the ground, and then being like this.
Yeah. And I mean, just the teams that are involved in like making sure that plane is safe, that it's stocked, that it's prepared. I mean, it's such a like symphony of everybody really working together and ensuring everybody's safety. It's when you're down on the tarmac or you're on the ramp, it's like, it's pretty inspiring, honestly.
You're so right though, that like proximity really does do a number on you. I actually did 4 years of Air Force junior ROTC in high school.
There you go.
I did it to get out of gym class, which is like the most ridiculous way to try to get out of running. Is like I ended up going to boot camp for like 4 summers in a row.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of like
it was not well. It was not.
I feel like that
and
backfired.
Also, and then like, why did I stay? Because I only needed to do 2 years so to get out of gym. But I mean, here I went from being someone who had like no knowledge of anything aviation related to like at one point I was like, I'm going to go to the Air Force Academy and do this. Like it is so amazing once you get inside of it to realize all the things that have to come together, from like the science to the culture and the community around it, is very intoxicating. So I get that. Yes. I also, you know, you get up in the little planes and you're like, oh, this is high.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Ugh.
Oh, okay. This is a lot
Ugh.
tinier.
Oh,
Minute
am I
metal
going to be in
tube?
charge of this? I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Seems like an awful big responsibility to keep this up in the air.
Yeah, so I'm going to build websites instead. I think that'll be
Yeah.
better for me. It'll be, you know, my own little joystick. But I do want to talk about preparedness. You mentioned, you know, disaster relief being a huge part of the work that you do. And obviously preparedness is kind of the precursor to that, right? Is helping people prep. I saw when we were doing some research that you all just rolled out, I think like yesterday, a really cool new collaboration with a very well-known community that many people are familiar with, especially if you have kids. Will you please tell us about this new endeavor?
Of course, of course. So we have a platform called Miles on a Mission that really allows individuals to contribute to nonprofits that have travel needs. So it's a great way for you to kind of be an individual philanthropist. You know, not everybody has the time to dedicate to organizations. Not everybody has the treasure to dedicate, but miles are definitely an access point for people. And so we relaunched our Miles on a Mission platform with Sesame Workshop. Woo! Which they do phenomenal work for children as well as children's parents around mental health, education. You know, they're going into areas that have faced, you know, some violent conflict to ensure, you know, the emotional well-being of the families in the area. And they do this with the Muppets, which is, you know, phenomenal, in a way that, you know, parents can let their guard down, kids let their guard down. You know, they're such a great organization. It was funny, they had an event this spring and we went to it, and you can see, you know, the puppeteers puppeting.
Yeah.
Puppeting.
But there's an opportunity for you to take pictures with the Muppets. And, you know, Abby Cadabby was there. And
Abby Cadabby. My niece loved Abby Cadabby. I think we got her to give a happy birthday video to my niece.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So I was like, I have to get a picture with Abby Cadabby. So similar to you, I can, you know, be very cool with my 4 and 3-year-old nieces. So you go up and you can see the puppeteer, but you are mesmerized by the puppet. You're talking to the puppet. And I'm a grown woman. But I am engaged completely with this puppet. You know, Big Bird came on stage and I gasped because I was so excited to see him. And so it was just really amazing to kind of see the power of the puppets in real life. And we're just incredibly excited to be able to support their work. And they're traveling to areas that are negatively impacted to ensure, again, the mental and emotional well-being of the families in the area that are negatively impacted.
That's awesome. And I think that really it really creates more of a global community in that way, right? Because you have individuals who can share their miles to help this happen. You've got kids that are, you know, able to get some of that healing and support. It's really, really cool.
Exactly. You see yourself as interconnected on a much larger base. So, I mean, we obviously are connected to our immediate community, to our familiar community, you know, to like maybe our work culture, but to see yourself as really like a community member of the world, you know, being able to contribute to something that's going to make the world a better, safer place. You know, creating those connection points are really meaningful, and I think pull you out of yourself in a really positive way.
That's awesome. In our prep, Mal asked, what was your question? How do you phrase the question? What is a mantra or a work?
What is a work philosophy that you take to heart?
Thank you. A work philosophy that you take to heart. And I loved your answer. You had it. It was ready to go. We had not shared these questions in advance. And you said, lead with joy. And I think especially when you're in a community related role, that's so crucial, but I think it's so important to anyone who's leading. Will you tell us more about that? Like, what does lead with joy mean to you?
I lead with joy, I think, is just a way that you can stay plugged into the present moment, and really celebrate all of the small wins. Because I feel like sometimes we can be inundated with these larger goals or initiatives that can feel very overwhelming, can feel like a lot of pressure on you. But if you're trying to be as present as possible, and really celebrate anything that's moving the needle forward, that makes me really happy. Like we did this, we took one step ahead, like that. Let's celebrate that success. Because I feel like you need to fill your cup up to keep fighting the good fight. Like you need to fill yourself up. You can't pour yourself out. I know as a younger person, I would do that. I would completely pour myself out, and I wouldn't think I was doing enough unless I was completely depleted. And so leading with joy is really like opportunities for just like little toppers on your cup. And then also, I think having your team see you as, a human being that enjoys things, that wants the good, that wants to celebrate either work things or life things or friend things. Work can be really hard. So finding those joyful moments, holding on to them, is just a great way to kind of like lead your life, but definitely, lead your team.
I love that. Well, and that's kind of like the other half of this, right? Is when you're doing the work that you do, there's got to be a weight to it sometimes, right? As much as this is like joyful work, the other side of bringing, Sesame Street Muppets to help kids in crisis is that there are children in crisis, right? And doing, disaster recovery work means that there's a disaster. As a leader, how do you help your team balance that? Like, how do you help them move through the weight of the work that you're doing while still like finding ways to cultivate that joy?
I think reiterating and reminding people we are a team. The expectation is never for anything to just be on you. And if it feels that way, raise your hand and we'll dive in. And I know that's sometimes harder to do than to say, because you're like, no, I can do it. But yeah, to your point, there's a weight to some of the work that we do. And knowing that you're not carrying that weight alone. For me, I grew up playing soccer. I'm a team sport all the way. And then, you win together and you lose together. And I think understanding that camaraderie, is really helpful in understanding, like, some days we're going to win and some days are going to be challenging. And some days, we're going to be like, oh no, can we do it? But it's always it's never like one individual making that decision on their own.
The shared responsibility part of it is so powerful, because that feeling that like you're not alone, it really does like take the edge off, so to speak, where it's like, we're in this together. We'll figure out a plan together. And it's that part of it that unlocks your brain and enables you to be able to take on deeper challenges.
100%.
Even commiserating with one another,
totally. That's like part of it. Yeah.
Like sometimes you're like, right, this is bad. Like, can we talk about it? Can I release some of this energy? And then it's like, oh, it's gone. Great. Okay. Well, I feel like now we can face it. Now we can do it.
I'm so glad you brought up sports, because it brings me to my last topic that I wanted to ask you about. Sports ball. Big sports fan here, as you can tell. No. I want to ask about the Special Olympics. I know this is a really important organization to United and to you. Tell us a little about that partnership and kind of how that works and what the outcome is.
Yeah, so Special Olympics is such a, I mean, obviously phenomenal organization, especially if you're talking about community. I mean, the community of athletes that they have built, the community of guardians, of coaches, of volunteers. I mean, it is a giant, passionate family when you are around Special Olympics. We're super excited about our partnership with them for lots of different reasons. I think they do amazing inclusion trainings for our employees, which is great. There's volunteer activities. Who doesn't want to like play softball or soccer or bowl? Bocce ball is huge too.
Oh, yes.
With the
Bocce
athletes.
ball.
Yes.
Excellent.
You know, and I think, and one of the programs I'm most proud of with Special Olympics is we have our Special Olympics service ambassadors. So those are employees that work for United. They work in our airport lobbies. They help our customers check their bags, you know, understand where the security lines are. They answer questions. And I think working with individuals with intellectual disabilities has only made our airport stronger. To, you know, make sure that they're being clear, that they're being thoughtful, not only to their coworkers, but also our customers. You know, you don't know, there's a lot of people that have invisible disabilities. And so being thoughtful of that, it's a great organization. Obviously they need a lot of travel too. They need to get their athletes to,
Yeah.
you know, we were just in Berlin for the World Games, which was phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and walking into the arena with Portugal, that's what we're you know, was just phenomenal. It was a full Coliseum full of, you know, enthusiastic supporters of Special Olympics. And so, you know, being part of their inclusion revolution, I think has been
Inclusion revolution.
I love that. Oh man, that's awesome.
A great one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad we get to learn a little bit more about what you do today. And thank you for sharing your insights. I have Lead with Joy written down on my notebook, and I feel like that's one that I'm going to return to. But yeah, thank you so much, Kristin. This has been just lovely.
Kristin.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation.
I loved
What a
it.
wonderful and thrilling job you have.
Right?
Best job in the world. Best job in the world.
Well, folks, you can subscribe to No Surprises everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch our wonderful, delightful faces on YouTube. Our website is weekofthewebsite.com, and you can also find us on Instagram at weekofthewebsite. And we are midway through season 3, Kelsey. That is,
Can't believe it.
More community talk coming at you next week.